I reckon. Nay, never redden so, lass. You and he know each other's minds by this time." Margaret held her hand and gently smiled into her face. Job Legh took the candle up and began a leisurely inspection. "Thou'st gotten a bit of pink in thy cheeks. Not much, but when I last see thee, thy lips were as white as a sheet. Thy nose is sharpish at the end. Thou'rt more like thy father than ever thou wert before. Oh, child, what's the matter? Art thou going to faint?" For Mary had sickened at the mention of that name, yet she felt that now or never was the time to speak. "Father's come home," she said, "but he's very poorly. I never saw him as he is now, before. I asked Jem not to come near him for fear it might fidget him." She spoke hastily, and to her own idea in an unnatural manner, but they did not seem to notice it, nor to take the hint she had thrown out of company being unacceptable, for Job Legh directly put down some insect which he was impaling on a cork pin, and exclaimed, "Thy father come home? Why, Jem never said a word of it. And ailing too! I'll go in and cheer him with a bit of talk. I never knew any good come of delegating it." "Oh, Job, father cannot stand. Father is too ill. Don't come. Not but that you're very kind and good, but to-night, indeed," she said at last in despair, seeing Job still persevere in putting away his things. "You must not come till I send for you. Father's in that strange way. I can't answer for it if he sees strangers. Please don't come. I'll come and tell you every day how he goes on. I must be off now to see after him. Dear Job, kind Job, don't be angry with me. If you knew all, you'd pity me." For Job was muttering away in high dudgeon, and even Margaret's tone was altered as she wished Mary good night. Just then she could ill brook coldness from any one, and least of all bear the idea of being considered ungrateful by so kind and zealous a friend as Job had been. So she turned round suddenly, even when her hand was on the latch of the door, and ran back and threw her arms about his neck, and kissed him first, and then Margaret. And then, the tears fast falling down her cheeks, but no word spoken, she hastily left the house, and went back to her home. There was no change in her father's position, or in his spectral look. He had answered her questions, but few in number, for so many subjects were unapproachable, by monosyllables, in a weak, high, childish voice; but he had not lifted his eyes, could not meet his daughter's look; and she, when she spoke, or as she moved about, avoided letting eyes rest upon him. She wished to be her usual self, but while everything was done with a consciousness of purpose, she felt it was impossible. In this manner things went on for some days. At night he feebly clambered upstairs to bed, and during those long dark hours Mary heard those groans of agony which never escaped his lips by day, when they were compressed in silence over his inward woe. Many a time she sat up listening, and wondering if it would ease his miserable heart if she went to him, and told him she knew all, and loved and pitied him more than words could tell. By day the monotonous hours wore on in the same heavy, hushed manner as on that first dreary afternoon. He ate, but without relish, and food seemed no longer to nourish him, for each morning his face caught more of the ghastly foreshadowing of death. The neighbours kept strangely aloof. Of late years John Barton had had a repellent power about him, felt by all, except to the few who had either known him in his better and happier days, or those to whom he had given his sympathy and his confidence. People did not care to enter the doors of one whose very depth of thoughtfulness rendered him moody and stern; and now they contented themselves with a kind inquiry when they saw Mary in her goings out or in her comings in. With her oppressing knowledge, she imagined their reserved conduct stranger than it was in reality. She missed Job and Margaret too, who in all former times of sorrow or anxiety since their acquaintance first began, had been ready with their sympathy. But most of all she missed the delicious luxury she had lately enjoyed in having Jem's tender love at hand every hour of the day, to ward off every wind of heaven and every disturbing thought. She knew he was often hovering about the house, though the knowledge seemed to come more by intuition than by any positive sight or sound for the day or two. On the third day she met him at Job Legh's. They received her with every effort of cordiality, But still there was a cobweb veil of separation between them, to which Mary was morbidly acute, while in Jem's voice and eyes and manner there was every evidence of most passionate, most admiring, and most trusting love. The trust was shown by his respectful silence on that one point of reserve on which she had interdicted conversation. He left Job Legh's house when she did. They lingered on the step, he holding her hand between both of his. As loath to let her go, he questioned her as to when he should see her again. "Mother does so want to see you," whispered he. "Can you come to see her to-morrow, or when?" "I cannot tell," replied she softly. "Not yet. Wait a while, perhaps only a little while. Dear Jem, I must go to him. Dearest Jem." The next day, the fourth from Mary's return home, as she was sitting near the window, sadly dreaming over some work, she caught a glimpse of the last person she wished to see, of Sally Leadbitter. She was evidently coming to their house. Another moment, and she tapped at the door. John Barton gave an anxious, uneasy side glance. Mary knew that if she delayed answering the knock, Sally would not scruple to enter. So as hastily as if the visit had been desired, she opened the door, and stood there with the latch in her hand, barring up all entrance as much as possible, obstructing all curious glances into the interior. "Well, Mary Barton, you're home at last! I heard you'd gotten home. I thought I'd just step over and hear the news." She was bent on coming in, and saw Mary's preventive design, so she stood on tiptoe, looking over Mary's shoulder into the room where she suspected a lover to be lurking. But instead she saw only the figure of the stern, gloomy father she had always been in the habit of avoiding, and she dropped down again, content to carry on the conversation where Mary chose, and as Mary chose, in whispers. "So the old governor is back again, eh? And what does he say to all your fine doings at Liverpool and before?" "You and I know where." "You can't hide it now, Mary, for it's all in print." Mary gave a low moan, and then implored Sally to change the subject, for unpleasant as it always was, it was doubly unpleasant in the manner in which she was treating it. If they had been alone, Mary would have borne it patiently, or so she thought. But now she felt almost certain her father was listening. There was a subdued breathing, a slight bracing up of the listless attitude, but there was no arresting Sally's curiosity to hear all she could respecting the adventures Mary had experienced. She, in common with the rest of Miss Simmonds' young ladies, was almost jealous of the fame that Mary had obtained, to herself such miserable notoriety. "Nay, there's no use shunning talking it over. Why, it was in the Guardian and the Courier, and someone told Jane Hodgkins it was even copied into a London paper. You've set up heroine on your own account, Mary Barton. How did you like standing witness? Aren't them lawyers impudent things, staring at one so? I'll be bound you'd wish you'd taken my offer, and borrowed my black water scarf. Now didn't you, Mary? Speak truth." "To tell truth, I never thought about it then, Sally. How could I?" she asked reproachfully. "Oh, I forgot you were all for that stupid James Wilson. Well, if I've ever the luck to go witness on a trial, see if I don't pick up a better beau than the prisoner. I'll aim at a lawyer's clerk, but I'll not take less than a turnkey." Cast down as Mary was, she could hardly keep from smiling at the idea, so wildly incongruous with the scene she had really undergone, of looking out for admirers during a trial for murderer. "I had no thought to be looking out for beaux, I can assure you, Sally. But don't let us talk any more about it. I can't bear to think on it. How is Miss Simmonds, and everybody?" "Oh, very well, and by the way, she gave me a bit of a message for you. You may come back to work if you'll behave yourself, she says. I told you she'd be glad to have you back, after all this piece of business, by way of tempting people to come to her shop. They'd come from Salford to have a peep at you for 6 months at least." "Don't talk so. I cannot come. I can never face Miss Simmonds again. And even if I could—" She stopped and blushed. I know what you're thinking on, but that will not be this some time, as he's turned off from the foundry. You'd better think twice afore refusing Miss Simmonds' offer." "Turned off from the foundry, Jem!" cried Mary. "To be sure, didn't you know it? Decent men were not going to work with a—No, I suppose I mustn't say it, seeing you went to such trouble to get up an alibi. Not that I should think much the worse of a spirited young fellow for falling foul of a rival. They always do at the theatre.